If a painter were to stand before them, the painter would feel the need to brush the image before them in a grand canvas. The image of a queen sat on the citrine while the king stood a merciful distance away from her, not too far away, like treating each other as if strangers, and certainly not too close to form formalities of intimacy between them. However, it was not their mere position that would make the painter yield their brush. It was a volume of shifting air that hung around them, choking out the genuine anger and disappointment at their stubborn faces. It was a picturesque of betrayal and foreboding discord, a theme the painter would want to capture. While Yin dared not to move to try and sit comfortably on her seat, her hand came up to cup the small bimp forming on her belly as she looked at Bakugou. Her husband didn't even bother to change out of the clothes he had worn in his journey back home, and it was clear the long road has not been forgiving to him. He looks tired and disheveled, with his face falling into many downward emotions. He wears such a comforting expression that Yin finds it hard to dismay him. True feelings. Every time he blinks, his eyes shone differently. First it was anger, then tiredness, and anger once again, until his face fell as if a century has worn him down, and now he's just so disappointed. And probably hidden in there, which he will fight for his life never to admit it, but sadness. He's calm, awfully and terrifyingly calm. Yin knows there is always a calm before the storm. She knew very well that she was the one who brought the storm upon herself. Is it true? His voice spent a jolt in her shoulders, like a thunder that threatened to conceive the tempest. She did not answer, even though she has the clearest image of the subject he's questioned. It is the very thing that her hand is touching right now. Their child. Answer me, Yin. Is it true? Bakugou asked again. This time she was prepared. It came out as a whisper. Yes. The drumming of her heart became painful as Bakugou slowly started to walk towards her. He raised his hand and started to take off his gloves. Yin did not notice he had gloves on. When he's finally standing in front of her, she could see the hesitation in his eyes and the way his hands clenched and uneasy. He raised a hand, but hesitant with her jaw it to the back of his side. He was reaching out for her stomach, as it was if his physical contact with his growing child is the only thing that could answer his question. But he backed down. It broke Yin's heart, secretly wanting his touch. Instead, Bakugou opted to sit on a chair across from her. Legs spread and elbows rested on his thighs. He lowered his head and his hand ran through his blonde hair. He then asked without looking at her, And the other thing you did? Is it true? Yin's breath was cut short upon the question. She didn't want to answer, but she has to. Not only because she's dreading it, but also because the rage of anger and disappointment in his voice has passed her ear and never came out the other. Guilt is starting to transpire from deep within her. Of course, it was obvious that he had upon it from midnight, and Yin knew that Bakugou trusts the noble, probably more than he trusts his wife now. So there's no point in lying about this. She could only hope that she'll be able to keep her other and more important secret, something she swore not to reveal no matter the circumstance. Even right now, she's in a very dangerous situation. But for now, the only concern is their child and her past acts. Yes, she swallowed nervously. Bakugou's hands dropped imply between his legs. He became quiet again. Yin waited until he looked at her with silent glare. Do you know what idea you have done, Yin? His voice came out calm, but the terrifying part? His calm anger. It was an unexplored maze Yin is set to step in and analyze. Yes, she answered. Bakugou didn't flinch and kept glaring at her. I know what I did. Yin swallowed a lump in her throat. I did something unforgivable, and I will face my punishment. Yin said it because he could even suggest it. That's when she saw his glare vanish, as his ruby eyes soften at her in something she doesn't quite understand. Is it pity or is it guilt? Bakugou avoided her eyes and looked down. She also unconditionally looked the other way. No, that's not it, Yin. He raised his head to look at her again with so much seriousness. I don't even care about punishing you anymore. Fuck. I can't even get mad at you right now. But you have to know the circumstances of what you did. Not to me, but to the whole kingdom, Yin. Her stomach dropped. She thought that Bakugou finding out about this is the worst thing possible, but that could not compare to the whole kingdom knowing what she did. Everyone knows? Yes, they do. And you know what that means, Yin? With you preventing yourself from getting pregnant before, and everyone knowing what you did will have your life at stake. Yin's chest seemed to tighten more as she sat straight. She is scared, for she knows what Bakugou means. The moment you came here and married me, you knew what was expected of you. That your purpose of being here is to continue this royal family's lineage. That was your duty. Your duty that allowed you to stay in court. Alive. He continued. That was the one thing that kept those nobles from throwing you out. Tell me, Yin. Now that everyone knows you purposely failed your duty, what do you think they're going to do to you? Yin's breath became short. She wanted to cry and pass out. She wanted to scream, hurl everyone at the wall, and yell out her cries. She wanted to be mad, but to whom? She was discerned that she was the one to blame, but herself in this situation? It was her who decided to start the coup and prevent herself from getting pregnant. And she was careless. Everything is falling apart. Her once flaming hope has been snuffed out and has become a mere smoke dissipating into air. Even with that realization, Yin couldn't take it anymore, and she started to shake in rage. Why must everybody else's opinions matter more than my whole being? Bakugou widened his eyes as she let out those words. Ever since I got here, I knew I won't be free anymore. I always tell myself that what I'm doing for this kingdom and everything that has happened to me, good or bad, is for the kingdom. That's why I kept going. I lost my voice and I have to fight to be heard. But that's just because I was fighting for this kingdom. And I know that if I start fighting for myself, no matter how loud my voice will be, nobody will hear me. The tears poured from her eyes, abrupt and immense like her rage. And I can't take it anymore. Bakugou froze in his place. Yin made sure to distract her tears, glistening eyes towards his, so her pain and anger could reflect on him. I'm sorry for wanting to deny you an heir. I'm sorry that I neglected my duties and disappointed everyone. I really am. Yin then looked down and dried her tears. But I'm not going to be sorry for deciding what I do with myself. Refusing to look up, she didn't even glimpse of a gaze her husband is giving her. She didn't see the softness that conceded in his eyes as her words sunk deep in his mind. You're right. You don't have to be sorry. Even as he spoke, Yin didn't move. I told you I can't be mad at you, because I know you're aware of what you need to do. You know your duties, and you know your righteousness. But you're also a damn stubborn woman who refuses to let anyone step on you. Clenching her fist, Yin closed her eyes and breathed out as she listened to him. The way he said his last words didn't even sound like an insult. You don't want to be chained up. And that's what I did. I tied you up and I understand why you did what you did." She finally had the courage to look up and meet his eyes again. "But everyone will be hurt now." Yin held the eye contact with her husband and was almost startled when he slowly walked towards her. Bakugou stopped in front of her and suddenly knelt. His hand came up hesitantly, but she let him take his time. When he finally touched her belly, Yin immediately put her hand over his. She couldn't describe the sudden serenity that crossed Bakugou's face. Although subtle, she saw it. Yin squeezed his hand and looked up to her. "No," he said. "I won't let them hurt you." The gray clouds hung heavily above the sky, compressing and reforming a single sunlight to prevent it. Instead, it poured down angry raindrops that it can almost concede the land underneath. As soon as Kirishima stepped down from the carriage, instead of moving his hands to form a shield over his head, he flailed around as his foot started to sink on the muddy ground. He carefully moved to the other spot and looked around for a decent ground to step on. But once again, he was distracted, this time by the sound of the hopeless voices coming from the carriage in front of them. He saw them scurrying under the pouring rain as a figure covered by a white cloth emerged from the carriage. "Your Majesty!" they all shouted in chaos, grabbing at the person under the white veil. "Please get the queen inside immediately." Kirishima became concerned, was about to move from his spot, but another figure emerged from the carriage as he just got off. It was Bakugou. He came down and ignored the mud that almost devoured his leg as he marched under the rain and towards his wife. "Go," he ordered, and the servants followed his order. Keeping a hand on his wife's arm, he led her inside the castle. The Masaru Castle, a fortress in the southwest of Igneous. Its impenetrable walls stood strong against the downpour, surrounding 100 feet square of land, while the fortress towered over the tower trees around it. This fortress, given by its name, is a gift of the late Queen Mitsuki to her husband, Prince Matsuru, on his 25th birthday. Kirishima marveled at the sight. Despite the rain, the fortress stood tall and visible to the eyes. Even though he wanted to see the rest of the castle's exterior, Kirishima has to get inside as soon as possible because there are things needed to be done. His boots left a muddy trail on the castle floor as soon as he got inside. The foyer is filled with large chests and rushing servants trying to organize everything. Kirishima ventured further inside the castle and found an open door on a left corridor. He stepped in and see that it is a drawing room, and it's already been occupied by the blonde and his, wife, Yin. The hair-colored female looked around the painting that filled the one side of the wall. She was long discarded with the white veil that covered her earlier, and is sporting her wet hair. The ends of her dress are stained with mud, and it's only a matter of time before the dust that collected on the carpet floor clings with the mud on her dress. Kirishima looked around and saw how the furniture covered in white clothes almost looked like ghosts within a barely lit room. It is clear that no one has occupied the fortress for years except for the guards stationed outside, but the current situation has forced the fortress to be filled with a few souls. Starting from now on, the Masaru Castle will be occupied by Yin, and was all Kirishima's idea. The moment he heard the full story, he must admit he was sad by what Yin did, but he can't entirely blame her for giving the responsibility she'd had with Bakugou before. But of course, she always has the best intent of Bakugou at heart, and he does too. And what Bakugou wanted to do right now is to keep Yin safe. Kirishima felt like he had to do something, and this is what he did. They left in secret. No one knows what Yin's location except for them and a few servants they brought that would stay for Yin's care. Of course, the soldiers that guard the fortress are sworn to secrecy as well, and they are strictly restricted by Bakugou not to let in anyone else unless invited. Hopefully, Yin will refrain safe here until the court people are in peace. Oi, don't just stand there, You need to sit. Bakugou's voice echoed as it unveiled the cloth covering a chair. I'm fine. I had enough of sitting during our travel, Yin assured. Then she looked like she was expecting something. Are you leaving soon? Yeah. We need to get back so it won't cause any suspicion. Won't you at least stay for dinner? The rain won't stop any sooner. Kirishima smiled sheepishly as Bakugou turned to him. He nodded and his blonde friend to try to encourage him to stay for a little bit longer. But it seems that Bakugou has no such plan. No, we can't. We need to go back as soon as possible. Bakugou finalized. Kirishima saw Yin's shoulders fell, but the woman kept a smile on her face. At the moment, Kirishima felt like he should leave in order to spare the two some private moment. And he did. He waited outside for Bakugou. When the blonde emerged, they immediately set outside and onto their carriages. The rain was no obstacle in their journey back to the city, but Bakugou's worried expression, which he tried to mask so hard, has been bothering Kirishima. But there's no turning back now. Don't worry, man, he spoke to his friend. She'll be fine. Bakugou shifted his gaze towards him without moving his head from gazing out the window. She better be. The sky is void of stars as it stretched within the reflection of Yin's eye-colored eyes. One would think she had the night sky trapped within her eyes, but it was the other way around. It was her who was trapped within the vast oxygen blanket that hung over all of them. She couldn't simply tear away any from the wholeness of the night sky, as she resembled the dry well of her heart, not bordered with blood, but with all the warmth and sparkles. She feels empty, and in this time of darkness, Yin seems to have found more comfort in the darkness. Not a single candle lit her room, the moonlight being the only one to shallow some part of her room in the light. Yin sat on her bed. The windows across from her is wide open, and she had done nothing but stare outside for the past hour. Her thoughts leapt into the many events that has transported these past few days. She thought of her departure from the palace, and now Uraka and Midoriya were shaken, haunted by the whole ordeal and the future it might bring to her and the coup. It has become such a big deal now that Aizawa has become involved, and only for her to make a wrong step that disrupted the flow of her plan and the more poured the branches of chaos. Yin felt bad, not only for herself, but for all the other people she has dragged within her plan. Her departure has endangered the entirety of her coup, and if she remains here any longer, there's no telling if it could even continue. Yin feels dreaded, but the worries kept working back to her like nightmares. They kept her awake all night. The worries about her coup, but at the same time, she tried to just get some peace for once. Peace! It felt like such a fear-fetching dream for now. For one, Yin doesn't even know her own kind of peace. It isn't the company of the people she loves because, it's all honesty, Yin wanted nothing but to be left alone in her own thoughts, in the hopes to sort everything out. But at the same time, loneliness is one's thoughts leads to a person battling a storm in a sea, alone, with no puddles nor boats. As Yin looked around her dimly lit room, she couldn't bring the will to be cozy with a new place. She started to yearn for the formality of her old home back in Magnus, and if something or anything in her emotions switched, Yin felt like not coming home anymore as she thought of her father and how he would lose his mind the moment he would have heard her situation. Groaning, she let her back hit the mattress. Her hands come to rub at her face, hoping to coax her eyes to sleep. But everything seems to be impossible right now. Yin got up and grabbed her robe and lit a single candle on the candelabra. Her feet start to carry her towards the corridor with no particular direction in mind. She wanted to read, but didn't feel like doing it at the same time. Yin started to gaze the painting pinning the tapestries that lined the stone walls. She followed the artwork, hoping it would wake her something in her. But there was nothing. She finally reached the end of the hallway and looked to her right to see a grand staircase that led to the foyer downstairs. "How dare you lay your hands on me?" Her ears peeked up at the voice that echoes from downstairs. The beating of her heart ceased at the formality of the voice dawned on her. Suddenly, a figure emerged from the darkness in the foyer as they stepped into the light by the staircase. Just like that, all the warmth in Yin's body was drained, and she could feel the cold biting at her. Her hand shook, as did her voice. "Father?" King Lin, looking most distressed and unkempt, distanced his anger, bulging eyes at his daughter, and if looks could kill, Yin would have dropped dead right there and then. Then he turned to the servant and soldier who followed him and shouted, "I am her father!" The female servant rushed towards Yin and took the candelabra off her hands. "Your Majesty, my apologies. We tried to stop him, but he—" "Take him to the drawing room," Yin said. Now. She knew she has to face her father somehow, but she didn't expect to see him right now. Yin's legs are closing to giving up, but she forced herself to stand firm as the soldiers led her father to the drawing room. When they disappeared, the servant beside Yin cried and panicked as the monarch almost stumbled down the stairs. "Your Majesty, you must rest. King Lin can wait tomorrow." "No." Yin's voice strained as she took a deep breath, her hand gripping at the servant's arm as she seeked for support. "I must talk to him now, for I want him gone by tomorrow." The servant didn't say a word after that. She was just there, watching Yin trying to calm down from her panic, ready to assist when she needed. As soon as Yin's raged breaths started to slow, she decided to come down to the drawing room. When Yin finally faced the door to the drawing room, she wrapped her robe tighter around herself in an attempt to seek for comfort. Opening the door, Yin was met with her father's back on her. Still, she can sense the rage practically oozing off his presence. When her father heard the door open and shut, he turned, and there he pinned Yin once again with those furious gaze. You foolish, headstrong child!" Yin flinched from his voice that almost shook the room. Her father never raised his voice this way before. She is threading through an unknown territory in the figures she supposed to know her whole life. Her father is not the same anymore. "What were you thinking, Yin? Have I not told you not to bear an heir? His heir in particular. You have one thing you're not supposed to do, and you did just that." It feels like Yin has sunken into her child form again, receiving an earful from her father, but it wasn't what it's like back then. It was so much easy to fail your parents' expectations as a child, but as an adult, everything seems so different now that a heavier burden has been placed on you. "I did not raise a fool." Her father started to pace all over the room now, hands grabbing at his hair in distress. "That child," he pointed at Yin's stomach, "that child will be our downfall, Yin. It doesn't matter if we get rid of the king because of it. It won't be you who will be sitting on that throne. It'll be that child. His child." "I'm sorry." Yin wanted to cut in and express an apology of her honest mistake. It was true that her father was the right to be furious with her breaking the one ultimate rule of her coup to be effective. However, underneath all that guilt is one, that she needed to be angry. Seeing her father's pathetic state while putting such a burden on her makes her angry. "Everything is ruined," her father cried and dropped himself on the latrine. Yin kept a distance away from him. She stationed herself near the door while her hand came to rub her upper arm. "Everything has gone to waste. My kingdom, my people, and my coup." Hearing those words, Yin felt angry taken over her. This time, she was the whom to be angry to. "Your coup." That caught her father off guard, her tone cutting and mocking his ego. He was placed the burden of his kingdom towards his daughter, and Yin led him. She bended, her back bowed by the weight of such burden, and now she refused to bend any further. She is prepared to break. Remind me again, father, to whom you did instead such ideas of that coup, she thieved. To me, yes, it was your idea, but it was me who did everything. You barely did anything at all. You scolded me to do a stranger because you're not competitive enough to run a kingdom. And when it didn't work, you placed another burden on me. I risked my safety for this coup. You claim as yours, when all you did was cower behind your words and drunk yourself to obsession. As if you weren't pathetic enough with your incompetence. Her father stood, red-faced and eyes bulging. How dare you speak to me like that? How dare you let your child take all the compositions of your actions? Do not speak to your father like that without me. You wouldn't have had the coup in the first place. You wouldn't have been able to get the satisfaction of getting vengeance from your husband. Without me, you won't have been able to think of getting the throne for yourself. For myself? I never wanted the throne, father. It was you who wanted it. I only wanted my husband to recognize all the good things I have done. Yin could feel the veins popping on her temples from now. She emphasized every bit of her words. Oh, and he did just that, didn't he? Because look what you have done. He pointed to her stomach again and stood up. Yin nearly backed off when he nearly approached her and gripped her arm so tight she knew his nails would leave marks. He will never recognize you, child. You'll be a fool to think that someone as cruel and proud as Bakugou Katsuki would fully recognize you. As if you're not worse than him. Instead of taking responsibilities, you gave it all to me. And when I made a mistake, you weren't even there to help me in this coup. You claimed as yours. Suddenly, his grip on her tightened as she shook her in anger. Shut your mouth, girl, and listen to me. I'm your father, and you will. Yin hit his chest, and he stumbled backwards, baffled by the sudden revelation of his daughter. No, I am done scrambling to people like you. And you're no longer the father I knew. Yin glanced at him. This is my coup now, father, not yours. You will no longer have a part in it, and therefore have nothing to say in what I can or cannot do. Yin's eyes widened as her father clenched his fist and brought his hand up with every intent to hit her. Lay a finger on me, father, and you will be reminded that I am a queen of this land you're standing in. I can have your head any time I want. In that realization, King Lin pulled his hand back, but his fierce expression never missed a beat. He breathed in and out before saying, You don't understand, Yin. You should not be a fool about this. He will come for you. The sudden ominous air is slowly choking the air out of Yin's lungs. The way her father's tone has changed into anger mixed with grief, warning, sent chills over her whole being. To fight the sudden fear that gathered inside her, she opened the door and decided to stop facing her father. I want you to leave now. You're making a mistake, Yin. That was the last word of her father before he left. While letting out her anger was done good with the turmoil in her mind, Yin's mind is once again disturbed. This time, not by confliction, but by fear of her father's last words. And now, left alone in the drawing room, Yin let herself collapse. She broke down and cried everything out. Sorry guys, this episode is already 30 minutes long, so you're gonna have to go to the next part, which is on my channel right now. But anyways, I hope you guys liked part 1 of, I can't remember what chapter this is, but anyways, I love you all so much. Go to my channel to get part 2 of this episode. Bye, lovelies! Mwah!